It's time to rank another soundtrack. It's time to rank another Mega Man soundtrack. This one, Mega Man 6, the final NES Mega Man, and the last one in 8-bit until Mega Man 9 would come out. Once again, I'll just be ranking the stage themes for the sake of uniformity. So there'll be no intro themes, no outro themes, boss themes, stage select, etc., etc. And I'll preface this by saying that this list is just my opinion. It's subjective, not to be taken as gospel, or to be taken seriously in any fashion. This is just my personal list, and I'm interested to see what others think. And I do enjoy reading about what makes the themes that I don't like as much more appealing to others. So without any further ado, let's get on with the list. At number 10, Windman. I like the percussion in this song, but it's otherwise a very plain, bland, and generic melody and stagnant, stays in one place kind of a song. It doesn't really go anywhere. I wouldn't really say I dislike the song. It's a testament to how strong all these soundtracks in the Mega Man series are, because my least favorite ones even aren't bad. I don't think this is a bad song, but I think it is a boring one. I don't really find myself getting into it. It's a filler track. Really just how I see it. At number 9, Yamato Man. I juggled between this and Windman for the 9 and 10 spots for a little bit. I really feel that they both suffer from being bland. Yamato Man has the problem of just having these plain and predictable melodies. The main riff in the beginning is energetic, and it is the high point of the song, but it is fairly uninspired. And the middle section is just a rehash of that riff, and the end section is just plain and generic. At number 8, Plant Man. The first verse has a decent little recurring riff, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It feels like the rest of the song is pretty stagnant, which seems to be a recurring theme here, and a lot of the soundtrack does suffer from a predictable format. A lot of the soundtrack doesn't have much in the way of dynamics, but at least Plant Man does have a catchy little main riff, and I do like the way that the end sequence that transitions back into the main riff actually sounds more like the beginning. Not the beginning of the song, but it sounds more like the beginning of a song. And it makes you think that the end is actually the beginning of the loop, but it's really the end, and it flows well into the first verse. But I don't think it's a great song altogether. At number 7, Dr. WILY. The first verse is pretty good. Nothing special, but it is a pretty good little riff. The next verse, though, is it's just standard, by the numbers, filler meh. It feels like almost like it's gonna build into something epic and big, which a lot of the Wily Castle songs have, and this one doesn't. It does transition well back into the main verse. I will give it that. I do like the way it flows, but I do wish that second half of the song was better. And it is kind of a shame that the final Wily Castle song in the NES run went out with a rather disappointing song. At number 6, Centaur Man. I'll give the song credit for standing out on its own. It has a different vibe than most of the rest of the soundtrack. It's quite pleasant and laid back. It has a different feel. And I do like the time signature change in here. The intro riff is in 3s, and then it goes into a standard 4/4 signature in the main verse. But one thing I don't like is the transition back into the intro. It happens too soon. It's like there's another whole segment that's supposed to happen here, and then it just stops. After 2 measures of this build, it just decides to go back to the beginning again. I feel like this is unfinished, and the transition itself is just kind of awkward. So, I don't know, I'm a little conflicted with Centaur Man's theme, but I at least get more of a reaction out of it than I did for the previous songs on this countdown. At number 5, Blizzard Man. It has a pretty good main riff. It's simple but strong and hooky. It pulls you in pretty well. It does a good job of that. And although I wouldn't say that this song has a lot of dynamics, it definitely does in relation to just about everything else that came before it on this ranking. It has a few segments that flow well into each other, but sound different from each other. It's not the same drony feel to it from front to back. I mean, it does have riffs that sound very similar to other riffs in the game. It's one weakness of the soundtrack, even the stronger songs, is that there's not a lot of variety. But Blizzard Man is a solid song, and I do like the end section. I think that it's one that could have been a little bit better. I don't know, I feel like there was potential for it to be more than it was, and then like the beginning of that end section is quite good, and then the tail end just sounds on the underwhelming side a little bit. At number 4, Mr. X. It's a pretty simple arrangement. You've got two halves of the song. The first half is like a Diet Proto Man castle from Mega Man 5 theme. It has the same instrumentation choice for the lead melody sound, and it has a similar rhythm to it. It's by no means a recycled job or anything like that, it just kind of reminds me of it. I do love the fact that you've got kind of two riffs going on at once. You've got a main lead that is up front and leading the way, but there is this background riff that's also melodic, but it's mixed lower, so it's not clashing too much. But the sounds do work together really well. The second half of the song is pretty good too, but I feel like it's setting up another segment that isn't there. I think it needed a little bit of a better transition back into the main verse, but I do like it a lot from beginning to end. I wouldn't call it an all-time Mega Man classic, but it is a little bit on the underrated side. At number 3, Flame Man. I think this song probably builds better than any song on this soundtrack. The intro is this lovely little slow build. It's kind of a shame that you don't hear from it again, because the soundtrack, like I said before, has a lack of dynamics, and it would be refreshing to hear more of it, because it's unlike any other mood in the rest of the soundtrack, but it makes all the sense in the world not to go back to this. I mean, why would you rebuild the whole song back up again? The main verse is pretty good. It has, I guess a predictable pattern like a lot of the soundtrack, but it does a really good job of working its way into the refrain, which you can really feel that it's on its way. And the end sequence is one of the more memorable of the whole soundtrack, and it's probably my favorite. It's not the most innovative song in the world, but you gotta love the way it builds up. The crescendo is a great payoff, and it does stand out amongst the rest of the soundtrack as having a distinct overall sound. At number 2, Nightman. The intro is really cool and flows into the main riff well, and the intro actually gives off the feel like we're going into a different type of song altogether, and I think that helps, especially in a soundtrack that suffers from predictability. The main riff does sound a lot like Blizzard Man's. I mean, a lot of ideas in this game were recycled from previous Mega Man games. Maybe they were running out of ideas in the music department too. But they are different riffs. I mean, it's just a similar pattern, but different notes. And I do find Nightman's to be a little bit more hooky than Blizzard Man's. I really like the end section too. It's a nice little breakdown that changes up the pace, and it flows awesome back into the first verse. The way the notes just slide right into it, it's very seamless and satisfying. The middle section isn't anything special, but it's the glue that holds the catchy beginning and the dramatic ending together. And the percussion is really good too. There are a lot of cool drum patterns in the soundtrack, and Nightman's is no exception. And at number 1, Tomahawk Man. Right after the intro, it kicks into high gear. It doesn't waste any time building into it. It just goes straight for the jugular, and it stays in that gear for basically the whole song. I know that I've complained about songs in the soundtrack staying in one spot from front to back, and that is kind of what's happening here, but I'm still finding myself drawn into it and never looking back. It has very cool and satisfying riffs, and I like how the end section is a slight rearrangement of the intro. There was some subtle but still great use of layering with the lead melody, and once again the percussion was dynamite. So that'll do it for this list. Here's a quick recap. At number 10, Windman. At number 9, Yamato Man. Number 8, Plant Man. Number 7, Dr. WILY. Number 6, Centaur Man. Number 5, Blizzard Man. Number 4, Mr. X. Number 3, Flame Man. Number 2, Nightman. And number 1, Tomahawk Man. I mentioned that I was debating with myself, going back and forth between Yamato and Wind at the bottom of the ranking. I did the same for the top as well. The top 3 in particular were battling it out. I could really swap any combination of these 3 and find myself making a case for it. I mean, sometimes there's a clear-cut number 1 in some of these, but this is one of the examples where, and not just the top, the middle too, there was a lot of going back and forth. But this is the list that I have right now, and I'd like to see what you guys think. What did you think of this list? What did you have for your own? What songs you liked, which songs you didn't? And I'll look forward to seeing those results. And that will wrap up this edition of Ranking the Soundtrack. Until next time.